It's a battle that we've certainly been waiting a long time for. We've had the Ford Everest on the market since September last year, but the new Toyota Fortuner has just been launched. So, which is the better bakkie-based SUV? So, the new Fortuner. The last one was very popular, but it was a bit boring. So the new one has to be pretty good if it's going to work its way into the hearts and minds of South Africans again. And I'm happy to report that it is. In fact, it's better in just about every single way that a car can be better. There's a new engine. It's a 2.8 litre where the last one had a 3 litre. Turbocharged diesel, 4-cylinder. It's got much more power and torque, 130 kilowatts and 450 Newton meters in an automatic version, or 420 Newton meters if you buy a manual. This engine is very ready to go. It's like the power is immediate. It's there for you whenever you want it. It's actually an impressive engine. It's quite an improvement over the last 3 litre diesel. You're not going to miss that engine at all. Now, I'm sure you're interested in the pricing of these two vehicles, and normally we would use the Cars.co.za board of important things, but my colleagues nailed that to the walls at our new offices. And so I've been forced to improvise. This Fortuner, the 4x4 Auto 2.8, will set you back 589,400 Rand. That's 45,000 Rand less than this Ford Everest XLT, which comes in at 634,900. However, you can get into a Fortuner for as little as 429,400. This is the cheapest Everest. This is as cheap as it gets. They're very closely spec'd as well. There are subtle differences between them. For instance, the Everest has manual seats, whereas the Fortuner has electric front seats. The Everest, however, has park distance control, where the Fortuner only has a rear-facing camera. However, it does have keyless start, which is quite a nice touch. Where the Ford starts to claw back some value though is in the warranties. 4-year 120,000 compared to the 3-year 100,000 of the Fortuner. And as you can see, their service plans are quite similar. So any way you look at it, I think the Fortuner is better value. Into the Everest now, and immediately I'm just slightly more comfortable. It feels like there's a bit more room in here. The seats are a bit wider as well. It's quite nice. The steering is also much lighter. It's just so much easier to spin around in slow situations. So for ride quality, we're doing a long stretch on tar and a shorter stretch on gravel roads to test the ride comfort offered by both cars. And immediately I think I'm more comfortable in the Everest. It seems to just deal with the really rutted gravel a lot better than the Fortuner did. And now I have a bigger 3.2 litre 5-cylinder turbo diesel under my right foot, and it feels a little lazier than the Toyotas. It's a bit weird that, because it is more powerful. It's got 147 kilowatts and 470 Newton meters, which isn't much more than the 450 in the Toyota, but it just doesn't feel like the power's there for me as immediately as it is in the Fortuner. If I put my foot down, we change gears and we're sort of off, but it's not 147 kilowatts worth, I think. All that power though means that it can tow up to 3 tons, and it should make a pretty ideal towing vehicle. Where the Fortuner has 3 driving modes, normal, eco and sport, you can only really flick the gearbox into sport in the Everest. Although it does have an advanced terrain response system, which will adapt the drivetrain to better suit the environment you're in, whether it's sand or rocks or mud. And the Fortuner just doesn't have that. You can have 4 high, 4 low, and the rest is up to you, basically. An important reason people buy cars like these is because they come standard with 7 seats. I'm in the 3rd row of the Everest now, and as you can see, I've got a little bit of headroom. I'm 1.7 meters tall, but this really isn't a type of space that you'd put an adult in for a long period of time, although kids should be quite comfortable. It's quite well appointed as well. I've got a drinks holder, an air vent, and my own light, but I can't adjust my backrest, so it's quite upright. To get out of here, I flick that over there, push the seat forward, it slides forward on rails. And it's a bit difficult to extract myself, but there we have it. Now the way the Fortuner and the Everest approach their 3rd row of seats is quite different. With the Everest, it's very simple. Flick that handle over there, the seat folds flat, and you get a flat load space, but quite a bit of the boot height is taken up by those seats. Now moving on to the Fortuner, and some people love the system and some people hate it. Pull that little tab there and the seat flicks up. Now that's new, the old Fortuner didn't do that, but what hasn't changed is this method of attaching the seat to the side of the car. Now as you can see, it takes up quite a bit of the width of your load space, but it keeps the boot height quite low. To get into the back of the Fortuner though is a bit easier. And that's because the seats tumble and fold with one pull of a lever. They get out of the way quite nicely. That's a bit easier than the Everest, that's for sure. Fold that back down. And, oh, well, I'm immediately more cramped than I was in the Everest. As you can see, my head is literally hitting the roof of the Fortuner. So that's a win for the Everest.
While the boot areas of both cars look to be about the same size, the tape measure never lies. So after many minutes of measuring, we discovered that the Everest has a slightly wider boot opening, but the Fortuner's is much taller. With 5 seats in place, the Everest offers more width and depth, but less height. And with 7 seats in place, the Fortuner has a much wider load area.
Both of these new generation bakkie-based SUVs have very advanced touchscreen infotainment systems. It's standard on the Everest, and in the Fortuner you'll get it standard if you buy a 2.8 litre engine. Now let's start with the Everest. It's called Ford Sync 2 system, and as you can see, it's divided into a quadrant. Top right, information like your apps and a calendar. Bottom right is climate, which you can also control using the buttons below. Top left is your phone. It's actually connected to Ashley right now, although I imagine that means his phone. And bottom left is media. Now that's one of 3 screens in the car. 2 are actually in front of me, and I really like these because they're very customizable. On the left, I can control the entertainment or my phone, and on the right hand side, all the information about my car, how much fuel I'm using, how far my trip's gone, and the rev counter. It also gives me a lot of warnings on that side. So it really is quite an advanced feeling you get from the Everest. Over to the Fortuner now, and at first glance it doesn't seem like the system in the Toyota is as complicated or as functional as a system in the Ford, but it does offer most of the same functionality. If I go into my menu, I can see my fuel consumption for my 5 previous trips. I've got Bluetooth telephony as well, and if I go to my audio, we find that it has a variety of sources which you can reorder. This screen is only one of 2 screens in the car. Where the Ford has 2 screens in front of the driver, this only has 1, and it is quite similar in its functionality, but I can't control my phone from right in front of me. Only buttons on the steering wheel do that. Now between the 2 systems, I think the Ford's is more advanced, but it's a bit more fiddly to use. The buttons are a bit smaller and they're a bit hard to jab when you're on the move. I like the design of the Toyota. It's much simpler, the buttons are much bigger. So I think I'm going to call this one a draw. Quite importantly, when you buy a leisure vehicle, you want to know that it has a good towing capacity. While the Toyota Hilux will tow up to 3.5 tons and the Ford Ranger will too, the Toyota Fortuner in automatic guise will only tow 2.8 tons, while a manual will tow 3 tons. That's exactly the same as the Ford Everest, although the auto will tow 3 tons in the Everest. But the Toyota does have trailer sway assist, so it will counteract any lateral movement of a trailer while you're towing. A big change to the Fortuner has been to the suspension. It's still a little bit bouncy over imperfections in the road, but it's much more sure-footed. What I like about this Fortuner is Toyota haven't deviated from their build quality. Nothing's rattling in here, and I'm driving over some fairly rutted gravel roads. Even that third row of chairs, which is weirdly hanging from the side of the car, those aren't making any noise at all, and I was kind of expecting them to. I can understand why cars like these are so popular. They're much cheaper than SUVs like the Volvo XC90 or Audi Q7, and they still offer 7 seats and loads of space and a high driving position. And while they may not handle as well on the road as their SUV cousins, they're much better off-road. They're full 4x4, so you kind of have that dual nature. And did I mention they're much cheaper? So, how do we conclude this very tight comparative test? Well, we've scored the two cars on a number of criteria. For the engine, we've given the win to the Toyota. It's more economical, it feels a lot feistier than the fairly lazy 3.2 in the Ford. For interior comfort, we've given it to the Everest. It's much more comfortable for the driver and it offers more space for all 7 occupants. But we've given the interior design to the Toyota, especially for the dashboard, which feels a lot more upmarket than this XLT version of the Everest. For ride quality, we have given the win to the Everest. It just seems to deal with road imperfections a lot better. It's a lot more comfortable and refined on a variety of surfaces. For load space, we've called it a draw. Even though the Toyota seems to have a little bit more space, that seating arrangement really gets in the way when you're trying to load stuff into the boot. And for pricing, well, that's obvious. We have to give the win to the Toyota. It's 45,000 Rand cheaper. So while this is very, very tight, for value for money, we do think we have to give the win to the Toyota.